People make comments like Jews burn themselves and the Jews are cremated again, and like all kinds of anti-Semitic comments that I don't even want to repeat. It's disgusting and needs to be banned forever.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to another podcast. Today is a special edition. We're going to be interviewing three different people, two experts and a fan. And we're going to be discussing anti-Semitism in the football environment. Now, we're going to be talking about fan culture. We're going to be talking about hate speech. We're going to be talking about online. But most importantly, we're going to go into detail on the research question, that is, why is anti-Semitism targeted towards Dutch football club Ajax Amsterdam? And we have been doing that, observing the comment section on posts of social media page 433NL, the biggest Dutch Instagram account for football. We hope you enjoy the podcast. It will be an abundance of interesting enjoy. Now, the first topic of discussion for today is online hate speech within the social media and psychological environment. Now, to get a better understanding of the problem, we've looked at the article, The Dynamics of Hate Speech and Counter Speech in the Social Media, a summary of scientific research by Dr. Katarzyna Boczarska. Now, this article was released in 2018, and what it does is it speaks about the dangers of online hate speech and the consequences of practicing hate speech. Dr. Boczarska states that hostile portraits of stereotyping of groups and minorities as others or different or dangerous can lead to dehumanization. And Dr. Boczarska says that this effect of discrimination can often escalate when in the means of broadcasting print or digital or social media to a larger audience. However, in this article, what is relevant for our next interview is her research that she has done on online hate speech. And I quote Dr. Katarzyna Boczarska in her research. Research has demonstrated that online hate has so much more viral potential than joy or sympathy. Fear makes us motivated to share hateful content and to warn others. Hate and ridicule are our weapons against what we are afraid of and what we perceive as unfamiliar. Our online invisibility and the facelessness of our online adversaries, combined with asynchronicity of internet discussions and perceived lack of consequences of our actions, make us prone to online disinhibition effect. Now what this means is that on the internet we say certain things that we don't truly mean or think about, and that leads to consequences. Now, according to Boczarska 2018, a recent internet survey has revealed that a majority of 67% of internet users have reported having encountered hate speech or hateful comments online. So it is a pressing issue, and we're going to start talking about that right now in our first podcast with Annemieke Wapperholm. Annemieke Wapperholm is a social media expert and a PhD candidate in online education. Psychologically, that online hate speech is even a thing. What are the motives of people that do hate speech?
Well, clearly it depends on what people are saying or what they're writing about. I mean, the topic depends on the situation. Generally, you could say that people feel they are together online. They feel empowered when they notice that people support their views. A lot of people are isolated somehow, and social media platforms give them this platform to express their thoughts, and there's nobody that tells them you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at some point their comments are removed because racism and anti-Semitism are both forbidden by law. You cannot do that.
Could you go more into detail on collectivism?
It's this group dynamic. It's where you feel you're part of a tribe. And especially when you're talking about Ajax, Feyenoord, they feel like they are a tribe.
Yeah.
And so if you're part of a tribe, you have certain rules and unspoken rules and regulations. And one of them is that you actually share the hate of the opponent. And so they're so used to sharing that hate, but what you can say
all right. Well, you talked about how people that on the internet write hate comments, write nasty things, that they feel empowered and they feel part of a community. Can you perhaps go a little deeper on that? Why do they feel empowered? Because they're on the internet.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're anonymous. Most of these trolls, as I would like to call them. The other thing is that people in Holland somehow seem to be, I think generally Dutch people are outspoken, and there's been an interview with, unfortunately anonymously, but I can imagine somebody from Facebook who didn't want to mention his name. Two people actually from Facebook whose job it is to control the comments, the online comments, and to remove comments that are hurtful, hateful somehow. And it's there, and so they actually needed psychological support because of what they saw and what they noticed.
On the internet?
On the internet,
oh, wow.
Yes. And especially Facebook, because they were working for Facebook. And this was in 2018, I think. And anything that is online can be shared very easily. And social media platforms, their job is to maximize user engagement. And it has been proven that hate and fake news actually are shared 70% more often than regular content.
Yeah.
So this is why algorithms, those social media algorithms, immediately share these kinds of fake news and
so
hate
there's
speech
just abundance
more.
of information also on the internet.
Yes. So, and what can you do about it? I mean, on the one hand, there can be legislation, which is already happening.
Yeah.
Platforms have to adhere to certain rules and regulations.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have to, I think, and you have to start at schools to show people and show students the consequences of this hatred online, and also inform parents. And that this is also why there are rules for users. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that you have to be 13 or sometimes even 16 to use. History is such an important topic as well. It's such an important subject to teach, and parents should also talk to their children about this, because if you have no idea what the Holocaust is, what it means, or what happened, then you wouldn't think twice about comparing a football match to the Holocaust, which is one of the most horrific things.
Last question. The biggest flaw of social media platforms in regard to hate speech?
Sharing it. I think that's the biggest problem. And those mechanisms that share whatever is out there to actually gain more user engagement,
that
is a big problem.
Moving on to the next topic of discussion, For the next podcast, we've spoken with Remco Hoekman, who is the director of the Mulier Institute, senior researcher at Radboud University, and past president European Association for Sociology of Sport. In this segment of the podcast, we will be speaking specifically about the sociological aspect of the fan culture and football culture in the Netherlands. To gain a better insight of the landscape of Dutch football in the Netherlands, to gain a better understanding of the sociological landscape of Dutch football, we've reviewed a report conducted by the Anne Frank House on football-related anti-Semitism compared between different countries in Europe. This research was conducted by Joram Verhoeven and it was released in 2015. This report of the Anne Frank House gives an overview of anti-Semitism within the landscape of football, going from the power of the fans, the involvement of education. However, what is most relevant for our podcast segment with Remco Hoekman is the article's detailed analysis of Ajax's connection with anti-Semitism and within the Dutch landscape. According to Joram Verhoeven, 2015, in the Netherlands, these anti-Semitic manifestations can mainly be heard and sometimes seen in the context of matches played against Ajax, the Amsterdam football club. The Ajax supporters wear their Jewish image as a badge of honor, which frequently triggers their opponents to sing songs insulting Jews. These manifestations may be considered anti-Semitic by neutral and Jewish observers, even though they are not directly directed specifically against Jews. In addition, the anti-Semitic incidents in the stadium have turned the word Jew, into a term of abuse that is frequently used in other contexts. Now, with that in mind, enjoy the second part of the podcast about the sociological aspect of Dutch football culture. You talked about that there are perhaps systematical flaws. Could you go into detail?
When you look at the sports sector, it has that competition element, and a lot of people say that sport is about inclusion, but sport excludes more than it includes. Because if you are part of one club, for instance, if you're a fan of Ajax Amsterdam, you're part of that community, but you're not part of the community of Feyenoord or other communities. So it kind of it brings people together, but by bringing people together, you also become part of a group, and you're kind of an outsider, and you exclude people that are not part of that group.
Yeah.
And it's the same if you, the element of competition, when you go on the pitch, it's we against them. And the fan culture and how the fans present themselves, they link it to certain elements, and they have certain cheers that they use. And for instance, if you from Amsterdam, they call themselves the Jews. They are the Joden, and that when other groups want to challenge them, they use that against them. It's the same. PSV Eindhoven, they use the phrase boeren, farmers, because they want to place themselves outside of the clubs from the big city, because they are kind of from the countryside. They're not from Amsterdam, they're not from Rotterdam, they're not from the biggest city in the Netherlands, but they have a link to the countryside, and they call themselves super boeren, kind of the best farmers there are.
Yeah.
And it's strange, but it's kind of their name. That's how they call themselves. So if other groups want to hurt them and make kind of fun of them, they use these lines against them. Whether it's the Jews or it's those superboeren or whatever they use, they try to find these elements to kind of irritate the other group and to make sure that they get some kind of agitated. And that
do you think that the the fans, the people that say things like this, do you think that they're truly aware of what they're saying, or do you think it's just for the purpose of teasing the other club?
Well, particularly when it comes to online comments, mostly anonymous, and just a lot of these comments are made without really thinking it through properly, because it's really easily done, these comments.
From a sociological perspective, do you think that these rivalries and the hate between those rivalries, do you think in the long run that will have a negative impact on sport and on society, or do you think this will always remain exactly like this and that's just the way it is?
Well, I do believe that it needs to be controlled better, and there's also already policy activities on this to really punish those that use racism within the stadium, or that hurt the other side by throwing firework and all that stuff. So there's more attention to keeping that rivalry within boundaries, within the stadium.
Yeah.
Because that also links to upholding that spectacle of having fans in the stadium. Because the easy way would be only allowing home fans. That would be the easy way, because then you don't have that rivalry within the stadium.
Yeah. Alright, now for the last part of our podcast, we'll be speaking with Jesse Peferelli, who is a fan of Feyenoord Rotterdam. And we will be talking to him about the consequences of hate speech and the relationship between different fans and different clubs. So without further ado, here is Jesse Peferelli. Alright, so Jesse, before we start off with the questions that I have for you, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself as a sport fan?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm Jesse, 19 years old, and I'd say I'm a diehard Feyenoord fan, Feyenoord Rotterdam. I have for like 3 or 4 years now season tickets, so I visit every match once every week. I'll be in the stadium, and during Europa Cup matches I'm also always present, so I'd say I'm a pretty diehard fan.
So you're very familiar with Ajax as a Feyenoord fan.
Yeah.
And Ajax is not very popular amongst other Dutch teams.
No.
I don't have to say that, but I will say it for the sake of this interview. What makes Ajax so prone to hate amongst fans?
Probably the arrogance. They think they're the best, and they are, they are the best, but they say that to themselves.
Now, there are a lot of chants against Jewish because Ajax is in its fan base a Jewish club. What is the thought, or not the thought behind the chants, but do you think that to a certain extent those chants are justified?
And let me say this first. I think these chants are despicable and they're terrible, and nobody should ever say something like that. And even though it is terrible, you hear it every match. Like,
to what extent is Ajax at fault for the anti-Semitic remarks and the initiatives?
I don't think they're at fault, but the Ajax fans embraced the name Jews as well. Like, they call themselves Jews, even though a major part of the supporters aren't Jewish at all. So I don't understand why they call themselves Jews, because I wouldn't call myself a Jew if I'm not Jewish myself. So, but of course, they're not at fault for racist or insulting chants of other supporters.
Would you say that hate in football has become normalized?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, because if you say these particular things in in the context of a football match and in a stadium, no one is thinking like, what the fuck is he saying? Everyone just says, oh, there's another one saying these things. But if you say that in like a total other setting.
How do you look at hate comments or just in general bashing on the internet? You must also see it at times. Can you also enjoy certain bashing, especially if it's against Ajax, a club that you dislike? Do you then look at that with, with disgust, or do you look at it and enjoy it? What are your thought processes behind it?
It depends. It totally depends on what people are saying, because if it's just bashing the other club because they lost a match or something, or because they something happened and we kind of make fun of it, then I can get a laugh as well, because I enjoy when things when Ajax loses a game. But
did you ever get an education in school or something on classes on hate speech in the internet?
I can't remember. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think I've ever had like a guest speaker or something, or a lecture about online commenting. No.
Do you think that something like that should be there or is important?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that's like to raise awareness of what online comments that on the first hand seem quite innocent, but they can may have major impact. And people need to be aware of that. Like, because it's so easy to type something behind your phone or behind your laptop and don't overthink the consequences. But there could be major consequences, so people need to be aware of that, I think.
To conclude this podcast, we've spoken to Remke Hoekman on the sociological aspect of Dutch fan culture and Dutch football in general. We've spoken to Jesper Verelli on what it's like being a fan and the fan environment in the Netherlands. And we've spoken to Annemieke Wapperom about the dangers of social media and hate speech that comes with it. Suggestions have been made as to how to resolve this issue. Annemieke Wapperom suggests that there has to be more education towards this topic, especially in schools, whereas Jesper Verelli has said that he has had no education on this issue whatsoever. Given the information given by Ms. Wapperom, Hoekman and Peverelli, a powerful insight can be made as to why anti-Semitism is targeted towards Dutch football club Ajax Amsterdam. Ajax Amsterdam is a Dutch football club that sees itself as a Jewish club and is proud of that. However, that is also the reason why other clubs are using that against them, as this podcast has revealed. The topic of anti-Semitism, especially in the environment of football, is a very complicated one. However, I hope that this podcast has given you an insight of the issue and what can be done. I hope you've enjoyed yet another podcast, and I will see you next week for the new one.